Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our incredible guests, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and Gabriela Romero, for so generously lending us their time tonight. My name is Rachel Eisenberg. To my right is Daniel Lang, and we're the Vice Presidents of the Albany Law Chapter of the National Lawyers Guild. The National Lawyers Guild has always strived to use the law for the people, to unite lawyers, law students, legal workers, and jailhouse lawyers to function as an effective force in the service of the people by valuing human rights and the rights of ecosystems over property interests. The Guild is dedicated to the need for change in the structure of our political and economic system. To quote the Guild's constitution, "Our aim is to bring together all those who regard adjustments to new conditions as more important than the veneration of precedent, who recognize the importance of safeguarding and extending the rights of workers, women, farmers, and minority groups upon whom the welfare of the entire nation depends, who seek actively to eliminate racism, who work to maintain and protect our civil rights and liberties in the face of persistent attacks upon them, and who look upon the law as an instrument for the protection of the people rather than for their repression." Both of our leaders tonight wholly embody the goals of the National Lawyers Guild. Both have promoted justice in the administration of the law, run grassroots campaigns that center their community's needs, and have spent their careers working on legal matters that affect the economic and social welfare of their communities. Our first speaker tonight is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. She was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and is the proud daughter of Palestinian immigrants. She made history in 2008 by becoming the first Muslim woman to ever serve in the Michigan legislature. After her term in the state legislature, she worked for the Sugar Law Center for Economic and Social Justice. There, she handled matters ranging from anti-bigotry initiatives to standing against tax breaks for wealthy people and businesses. Congresswoman Talib made history again in 2018 when she became the first Palestinian American woman elected to Congress. Congresswoman Talib is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America and has consistently championed progressive priorities such as raising the minimum wage, supporting Medicare for all, immigration reform, and debt-free college. She has taken on systemic issues such as police brutality and the impact of corporate money in politics, and has an incredible record of fighting for working families, environmental justice, and anti-poverty measures. She truly embodies the best of the Guild ideas and of progressive politicians. With that, it is my honor to present Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
I thought one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle was controlling this whole thing, so they muted me. So thank you all so much for this incredible opportunity to share space with all of you. I can't express to you all enough, especially to, of course, the Albany Law School, National Lawyers Guild, and a really sincere shout out to my good friend who I've worked with at the Sugar Law Center, Ray Leggett. He was by my side and fighting against injustices in Detroit and fighting for workers' rights. And I'm really sorry, Ray, to hear about your grandma Mimi. So I just want you to know you're an original Team Talib member and OG, and this is why I'm doing it. So I can't express to you how proud I think all of us are of your accomplishments, and you're starting to look like a lawyer too, which is kind of cool. So really proud of you, Ray. So I'm really thrilled to be with all of you today. I guess I don't know if I'm the first member of the National Lawyers Guild to serve in the United States Congress, but I know NLG is one of the most critically important parts of our progressive movement, and we need reinforcements now more than ever. And the Guild, again, is in the front lines. The National Lawyers Guild, I know not only in Detroit and so many other places, are defending frontline communities. They're defending us in the streets, fighting, every single day against oppression of all types. When you're at a protest and you see those neon green hats protecting your rights and coordinating your legal defense, please thank the National Lawyers Guild. There is a movement in this country amongst both political parties to criminalize progressive protest and constitutional rights. We're all feeling it. And the National Lawyers Guild is such an important check against that erosion of those rights. The National Lawyers Guild has been a key partner for my work in the United States Congress too. When we need to expose the horrible conditions in immigrant prisons and detention centers, where some women were being forcibly sterilized against their will and without their consent, it was the National Lawyers Guild was there to document, to litigate, and get those facilities shut down. In part, what is so inspiring about the National Lawyers Guild is the energy we are seeing among young people like you all inject into those organizations and spaces. There is a new urgency to our work, and with right-wing attacks on our rights getting bolder and bolder every single day, y'all. And their decades-long project to take over the courts and install minority rule in state governments across our nation has been enormously successful. You all feel it and see it now. Look at Texas at their local total, complete abortion ban. When Republicans are in power, they make the most of it, right? With devastating consequences for the poor and people of color. You have to see the practice of law and making of laws as inseparable and intertwined. You have to be lawyers for the movement, not just the niche that you carve out, right? The folks in the Federalist Society aren't going to take mercy on us. We need to fight and we need to win. Young people see so clearly, so laser focused on how high the stakes are and how we can't afford further losses. We need to be radical, aggressive, bold, and unapologetic about everything that we do. And the National Lawyers Guild is that law firm of the people. You hear me? You all, as members of the National Lawyers Guild, you are a part of a law firm of the people. And we need all of you, every single one of you, to make partner. So much of the fight ahead is structural, right? The right has been stacking the deck for years, and the Democrats have offered almost no resistance. We now know we have a Supreme Court that is hopelessly stacked towards corporations and the wealthy for our generation. And we can't even get liberal justices to retire to appoint the next generation, right? It's clear that we need to expand the court to reverse the anti-democratic actions of the radical right. And anything less is a total surrender that we will sacrifice countless Americans to the crush of corporate power and radical hatred. There are reasons for optimism, though. Look no further than the Striketober, right? The massive wave of worker strikes and action that has swept our country. Our strength is really in our solidarity, and working class solidarity is on the rise. Our future is through our collective direct action, and we have to do everything possible to support and encourage these movements to take back the means of production and the value of our labor. And I can go on and on about what is at stake, but I want you to know this girl, I grew up in Southwest Detroit, and I'm a daughter of Palestinian immigrant parents. My father only went up to 4th grade education, my mother 8th grade education. When my father was able to truly feel human dignity was when he came to this country and he became part of the UAW. He said to me, we were all on the line together, no matter our income, no matter our backgrounds, no matter our education level, we were there fighting for human dignity in the workplace. And he constantly reminded me of what that solidarity felt like. And so I just want to know all of you have a fighter and a member of the National Lawyers Guild in the United States Congress. And I'm not going to back down or waver. And I'll continue to obviously take the attacks that come with that. But know that the truth is what we have, and that's the most powerful. And it's those lived experiences of many of the people we're fighting for that is missing in some of those places of power, including Congress. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions for the remainder of the time. And again, thank you, Ray, and thank you to Albany LLG for inviting me again to share space with all of you.
Okay, so we're going to go to the Q&A section. I think it's a little awkward with people being physically in the room and also online. So I think the best way to go about it, people who are physically in the room, they should raise their hand. I'll point them out. They'll come down to this podium that's right in front of us, and then they can ask their question. For those who are on Zoom, raise your hand, and then I'll unmute you, and then they can ask. Then you can just say your question, or you can type your questions to Rachel. Okay.
Does anyone have questions? Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. We can see.
Hello, Congresswoman Tlaib. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. My question was just if you could speak to how you persist in the face of continuous systemic failure in just our world today.
Is she muted? Sorry, one moment.
It might be my fault because I have a tendency to mute myself when I'm done. And so I apologize if that re-triggers the option or anything. So thank you for the question. I think you're asking, how do I cope? Is that the question? I don't know if I need clarification, but I mean, look, I think that sometimes, you know, folks focus so much of what we're, you know, against instead of what we're for. And so we really need to focus on what we're for. I believe that is, you know, something that I focus on instead of focusing on those that keep saying you're against this, you're against that, or this movement's doing this and they're against this. I'm like, but I'm for feeding my neighbor. I'm for freeing my immigrant neighbors from this form of oppression and policies in our own country and all those kinds of things. So I think that I really think that that is something that, you know, is a way for me to cope, is not focusing so much on this continued kind of failure of those recognizing what we're for. And they're so focused on trying to vilify what we're, you know, what we're trying to do in our communities. I'm always inspired when I come back to my district and I feel this connection with folks that understand that urgency I talked about. And they make me feel less like all this is failing. They make me understand that so much of what we're doing is really connected to movement work on the ground. And if anything, growing up in this beautiful Black city, I mean, it's incredible in the city of Detroit. And Ray will tell you, every reminder, every corner is a reminder of the labor rights movement, the civil rights movement. And, you know, I was raised to understand that it's not who's in Congress or who's in this, you know, Congress, or who's in the White House or who's in Congress that gets transformative change. I mean, Civil Rights Act didn't automatically happen because, you know, the president decided it. It's because movement provokes on the ground, from boycotts to protests to pushing back. That has been the way I think that has led to real transformative change. I mean, again, I really focus on that, and that inspires me more, instead of always focusing on what the media and others and other folks kind of paint it as. Because when I come home, folks are seeing things move, and they're seeing, I think, the change that they want to see. And again, it's going to take a while for folks to fully click what all of us as National Lawyers Guild members are fighting for.
Okay, Nathan has his hand up.
We'll do online, then in person.
Hi, thank you for joining us. I put a question in the chat. I'll go back and read it. So my question is, what role does workplace democratization have in the fight for economic justice? And how can the left legitimately push for this within a liberal legal framework, which at its core is fundamentally opposed to the idea?
So, I mean, are you talking about like organizing in the workplace against corporate greed and really trying to build up what we saw really in the early foundations of unions? And I think we need to get back to that kind of support. I mean, if you look at the National Lawyers Guild, some of its founders were UAW labor lawyers, right? Some of the first. Maurice Sugar, where, you know, Ray and I worked at, I mean, he was the first, I think, literally the first attorney for the UAW, and fighting, because as the union became in existence and we started winning, that's when the corporations, the big boss, or whatever they called them back then, my dad said, those folks tried to, little by little, and you can see it now, deteriorate the strength of unions. That's why you have the right to work moving through, including my state and other places. That's why you see Amazon and others violating people's rights to organize in the workplace. You know, it's one of the reasons I'm really pushing for the PRO Act to pass out of the Senate, you know, the Senate graveyard where everything seems to die. But, you know, I'm continuing to push forward. Those are the kinds of changes. We have to really, truly protect the right to organize in the workplace. That's how we're going to take on Amazon and Walmart and so many other places that have put corporate greed before the human dignity of those that work in those spaces. So check it out, continue to push forward, and we can't just rely on union leadership. We have to also be the ones to support members of many of these unions, but also those that still are waiting to become a member of the union.
Thank you. There's another question in the audience.
So take my mask off.
It's fine.
Either way.
Hello, Congresswoman. Is that going?
Just project a little more.
I can hear them.
Oh, great.
Hello, Congresswoman Tlaib. Thank you so much for doing this. My name is Jasper Nazine. I've been involved in Palestinian organizing for about the past 2 years. And I've noticed that in that time, there's been a unprecedented amount of times level of support and exposure for this movement. Although unfortunately, it has generated a backlash amongst lobbying groups like the ADL, APAC, and the DMFI. And I saw this firsthand when I was finishing my undergrad in Florida, where Governor DeSantis passed an anti-BDS bill, and my college adopted policies which would significantly limit the ability for groups like Israel and Palestine to work on campus. What would you recommend? How can we keep this momentum going and prevent it from stopping in the face of this pushback?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's very new to many, and I guess in college campuses across the country, but also in just movement work, of the kind of retaliation and the intimidation and tactics to silence many of us that are fighting for Palestinian liberation. It's not new. There have been advocates that have literally been killed. I just uplifted Alex Oda and what happened to him as somebody that was really a face of the movement for Palestinian human rights. I think, one of the things that gives me a tremendous amount of hope is we're winning the cases in the courts from those that are forcing us to be silenced and say that's not First Amendment right protection, to employers and others, including states that are pushing this idea around having some sort of allegiance to the certain causes that we might not be able to support, but we have First Amendment right to say no, we don't support that. But I think what gives me honestly true hope is when I see groups like United We Dream, which founders are like DACA, they're dreamers, and their group talks to each other, and as the board and all those folks were talking about, what else can we do to strengthen our movement for DACA, for immigration reform, for immigrant rights in our country. They decided to add Palestinian liberation to their list. And it just gives me hope, because I think a lot of folks that are in the movement work understand the connection and understand the slippery slope of, wow, if they're going to silence those and attack and intimidate those that are fighting for Palestinian human rights, it's a slippery slope to say who's next. Is it us? Is it immigrants? Is it the next person again that we're fighting for their true freedom and for their equality? And so I just want you to know there's so many groups now, especially nationally, that are recognizing the importance to protect the movement around Palestinian liberation. And so, check out United We Dream, check out some of the folks, Dream Defenders in Florida are phenomenal, that I know are in the front lines pushing back against some of the attempts to silence us.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
Ray has his hand up.
Hi, Congresswoman Tlaib. How are you doing today?
Good, Ray. How are you?
It's good to see you, Rashida. I'm doing all right. Now, we've spoken about the importance of organizing and how important it is to be active as attorneys in this effort. But in the face of decisions from the Supreme Court like Janus and Epic Systems v. Lewis, which can be so demeaning to the face of organizing, to the face of labor, how can we fight back in a unified charge against these movements of the Supreme Court?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it is always different layers. It's never one strategy, right? We have legislation to expand it. We have folks that are fighting against it at the local level and organizing and teaching. There are so many of our fellow Americans that still don't understand just the incredible power, and they're seeing it though. The Supreme Court has, right? I mean, some of the decisions that impact them. So even if, you know, we see it with what they did with the Voting Rights Act, we see it what they're doing in regards to women having a choice and so much more. I think when it impacted healthcare is when there was even a more energy all of a sudden of like, wow, can they really do that? Because I think a lot of folks haven't been truly fully engaged in understanding the amount of power that 9 justices have on our quality of life and our future. So we have to continue from legislative court pushing back. And we've seen that in our history in our country that we had to go multiple times to the Supreme Court, get it done. But of course, I support expanding the court. We need to change how they've rigged the system.
Now, in regard to expanding the court, Alexis de Tocqueville On Democracy in America famously said that the Supreme Court, the judicial system in the United States, is so special because it's the undemocratic safe block for democracy. Do you think that an injection of democracy into our legal system would benefit us towards greater social end?
I mean, obviously, any increase in folks engaged in our democracy changes everything. It does. The more we have people participating, the better. But I think what I think it comes down to, and I think this is what she's trying to, is that our process right now is tainted and it's rigged. It's rigged for only a few in our country. Again, while we weren't looking, the courts have been stacked to the point where people still don't know that the Civil Rights Act has been watered down from decisions where you can't even show disparate impact to show discrimination. I got to go find a freaking email that the mortgage company was, given a higher interest rate to an African American, or, I can't show disparate impact in that the auto insurance industry is using education level, credit score, and zip code as factors, non-driving factors, and calculating insurance rates. We have to now, as a higher threshold, because of them stacking the courts, of it showing intentional discrimination instead of disparate impact, when we see that the impact of itself and policies on the ground are hurting communities of color and sometimes low income communities, and those depending on income sources and so forth, those of disability income are directly targeted sometimes. So I think when people see that it has touched their lives, beyond where folks think, oh, it's a bill, it has to be changed, they don't realize we pass bills and these folks interpret it, and it's interpreted in a way, again, that only helps the wealthy and the few.
Thank you, Rashida.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Congresswoman. It's really an honor, great experience. I'm just kind of wondering, you wake up every day, you see these outrageous headlines about things like Jewish space lasers, Big Bird being a communist, all these kind of crazy stories coming from the far right. So as someone that's actually worked with kind of the people at the front of this movement in the House, are they people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, are they kind of as crazy in real life, saying these outrageous things, or are they kind of part of the overall right-wing propaganda machine?
I think it's really important to know that dismissing it as, oh, it's just they're the fact of the matter is it's dangerous. They are spreading some unbelievably hateful, but also extremely dangerous rhetoric around a number of things that impact our residents. And they're on a national platform. These are members of Congress, these are other folks, but I really think we can't continue to dismiss it. We saw an insurgency on January 6th. It's real, it's here, it is real. The more they investigate January 6th, they realize, wait, who funded this? Exactly. Who funded 12 buses or so from Michigan? Who put them up on a hotel? Like, there is a real movement, and they're going to focus on 1 or 2 members of Congress. They're just the product of really the symptom that we have in our country around white supremacy. And so it is really critically important that as more and more folks, from a colleague, just recently, fantasizing and sharing a video of killing one of my colleagues, to the number of things that, even one of my colleagues on this recent vote, I have Republican colleagues now, getting death threats for the first time. And I said, yes, being complicit and understanding, like, don't say, I'm like, don't do that. That's dangerous. And so we really have to be very, very careful. And I hope I'm answering your question, because I just want us to be very understanding that this stuff is real, and what you're seeing is actually making an impact. And it's one that I feel like is going to make January 6th look like a trial run of what might be coming our way in regards to trying to suppress votes, trying to, push these conspiracy theories around the pandemic, and so much more that is going to hurt our country. It is hurting our country now.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, we have a question from the chat. It says, with the obvious lack of respect from police in regards to disrespecting our rights while protesting, what do you see as the future of law enforcement involvement at protests ideally? No involvement at all, merely crowd control, etc.
I don't know. I don't know how to define involvement and what it takes, but I'll tell you this. I've never Detroit, I grew up in Detroit marching. I think it was just part of your DNA. You breathed, you ate, you marched in Detroit. And we had some of the most, I think, committed work with Detroit Will Breathe, and so many folks, Michigan Liberation, just a number of organizations that have been on the front line and saying, we need policies that truly show Black lives do matter in our city. Where we spend $300 million on policing, and we only spend $8-9 million on health, public health. That's literally the budget right now. And so what we saw is, a police chief who, who basically gave orders to the police force in Detroit to attack and target Black Lives Matter protesters, many of which had really serious injuries, were abused, their rights were violated. We continue to win in the courts in regards to that, by the way. So they can't, use tear gas. What are those things called, Ray? The baton, is that what they call them? Yeah, they can't do, literally we had to pass a court decision to say, don't put people in chokeholds in an 85% Black city, right? And so when we took them on and pushed back, again, you're there to, they use those words to say, we're trying to keep what I've seen over and over again in my look, and this is just me expressing what I've seen in my own backyard, is that Black Lives Matter protesters were met with violence from police, where, literally neo-Nazis who showed up in Detroit were escorted across the street very gently. They even attacked one of the protesters saying, what are you doing in the city? Leave us alone. And, she was pushed down. Nothing happened to those folks. And so I just want you all to know that there is a serious problem with the structure and culture within our policing right now in our country. It's not keeping us safe, and it's violating our rights. And what I saw is, when we wanted evidence of why did you attack Black Lives Matter protesters, all of their cameras, their body cams didn't work. Every single police officer's camera did not work. And so, there's something going on in that regard. You should know we've had a couple hearings, and please pay attention to this, because there have been more and more articles that have been coming out, but really investigative articles, not the kind that's real thoughtful articles about the fact that white supremacists have infiltrated law enforcement across the country, that we have an issue within the agency in regards to those that might be connected to white supremacy groups. It's clearly coming out currently, even in the January 6th insurrectionists. Some of that is coming out now. So I think it's really important when people ask me what the role is. The fact of the matter is right now policing in our country is not keeping us safe. And right now there is obviously, there is evidence over and over again that white supremacist violent organizations have infiltrated some of our police departments across the country. And so that is my answer of what role we have to understand and understand what is coming out. It's real. We have a problem within our policing in our country.
Thank you, Congresswoman Tlaib. We have another question from the audience.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for joining us this evening. This is a really important discussion. I'm wondering if you can please give us maybe your analysis or balance sheet of recent elections based on what we saw in Virginia, New Jersey, and closer to here in Buffalo, New York, the mayoral race, which a lot of progressives, myself included, were following, in which India Walton, an insurgent candidate, an inspiring candidate, a nurse, an organizer, and a democratic socialist, was defeated in what I think is a pretty shameful write-in campaign in which the incumbent partnered with Republicans to defeat the progressives. How do we overcome that? And what can we learn from not only that race, but our recent elections as a whole? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people want to analyze so much of what happened in Virginia and other places, but, please, understand that some, for me even, people don't realize like how very much politics is very much local. And I also say this because, historically, if you look at, I think consecutively, if we've ever been able to elect a Democratic governor, I think it's consecutively in Virginia. We haven't been able to do that since I think the 70s or the 80s. Somebody can look that up, but I'm pretty sure it hasn't been done in a very long time. But also just realize that how little people depend on what the candidate is, what are some of the things the candidate was saying, what are the things that campaigned on, and the same old kind of process of not localizing what they will do for the residents and the community and all those things that, very much people were saying that was very much missing, and folks were kind of speaking over some of the needs of the residents. And again, I don't live in Virginia. This is just what I'm understanding is historically that just hasn't been the case. The other, important thing, I was devastated to see what happened to India. I mean, devastated. But just don't underestimate the Democratic establishment and those that may have, again, wanted to take someone out of a picture that was going to move towards taking on corporate greed in such a powerful way, maybe around housing, access to food, jobs. I mean, she was speaking in a way that jeopardized those that made profit off of our broken systems. You have no idea how many, and you all know maybe because you're guild members, but so many people have profited off of racism, poverty, oppression, mass incarceration, broken immigration system, you name it, they have profited off of it. And so don't realize this, there's always bipartisan support when it comes on taking corporate greed. I've seen it over and over again as the third year in Congress. And so pay attention to that in that regards to what happened in Buffalo. And we can't underestimate the kind of support you're going to get. I mean, I see the bipartisan support that comes together. They seem to unite in taking out people like myself and others that they underestimated, didn't know were coming around the corner. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? And again, these institutions might not be ready for us, but we're a movement, and they don't know what to do with us anymore. I mean, literally, we're a movement. And don't think there's not going to be another, India, and she ain't going to go do it again. I mean, they can keep trying, but we're just so many of us. So we can see it, we know it. We're living it now, that profits and corporate greed is running our country, and we're tired of it.
Good evening, Congress members. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I can't tell you what an honor it is to just chat with you via Zoom. It seems like increasingly on all levels of government, all branches of government, we're having a harder and harder time holding our elected leaders accountable, and then we just re-elect them again. Leaders who don't have a base that help get them elected, or that don't actively engage with that base once they're elected to remain grounded. What are your thoughts on that? How can we hold our elected leaders who run on one platform and then are absolutely going against it? Corporate money is just leaking into everything we do, from our executive branches, especially in our legislative branches, but even in the judiciary. It's really bad, and we need your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I want you to know, we got to realize that people like us need to run. It's like, we don't think that. We think let them run and let them hold. No, I think it was Shirley Chisholm, first African-American woman ever elected to Congress, used to say, if there's not a seat at the table, bring your own chair. I'm going to adjust that a little bit, because that table's getting way too big and they seem to sprinkle us there, and then our voices are diluted. I think it's about time we take somebody else's chair. Their time is up. Obviously, the table hasn't resulted in, combating poverty in an impactful way, or addressing our broken healthcare system, or addressing the fact that, literally you all are going to graduate with so much freaking debt. I don't know how, when at one point your lives are going to be able to be of quality, because you're literally going to have chains on you because of student debt. So I tell this to movement folks all the time. When my mentor, I said, oh, you should run for state representative. I don't know if y'all know, I served 6 years in the state house. And I looked at him, I was like, I'm not going to sell out. And he's like, he told me to sell. I was like, no, but I just kept thinking that way. I don't want y'all to think that way. I think these institutions aren't ready for us, but we're coming. And I just hope, as we're thinking about, let's do a ballot measure, let's do, a town hall, do a teach-in or a sit-in, or let's boycott, let's do all this, that on that list is run for office. And I got to tell you, the more of us that are running, the more of us are getting in. And we're seeing it really across the country, and it's exciting.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We have a question in the chat. In your opinion, if you could change one single issue or pass a law or policy change, what would have the most positive impact?
I mean, for my district, y'all, the most impactful thing that I can do, and I can't just pick one, but I'm going to tell two, okay? I have the third poorest congressional district in the country. So anything we can get close to a universal basic income would completely transform my district. These are frontline workers. These are folks that, they have put the work in. They are living with environmental racism. They have dealt with, the discrimination within our housing that came from our own federal government. I mean, you name it, it's happened. So I want, I have the Boost Act, which would uplift 45% of Americans living in poverty out of poverty. And it's the closest thing to universal basic income. But poverty is traumatic, and it is something that I don't think we realize impacts health, impacts so much more of things, and even neighboring communities. People think it doesn't impact. It does impact you. It does really result in the fact that our neighbors, everybody can't thrive, will impact all of us. And so anything we can do in that regard. And I also have to tell you, as somebody that grew up in Southwest Detroit, where I thought that smell was normal, I didn't know that much trucks and people having asthma wasn't normal. I really did think it was normal. Is really combating the need for clean air and clean water in our country. I think those are the basic issues around giving them a livable planet, but also giving them, an opportunity to live with help in a form of universal basic income. I think that would completely transform the lives of my residents.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the audience? I think we're nearing our time with the Congresswoman. Oh, we have one more online. If you have a few more minutes, Congresswoman Tlaib. Okay.
Hi. So I'm actually from Michigan. I was born and raised in the UP, and I'm also a member of the Keweenaw Bay Indian community. And a lot of the reason that I'm in law school is so that I can work on tribal issues specifically. So there's been a lot of decisions recently that do strengthen Native sovereignty, such as the decision in Oklahoma regarding tribal lands and the Keystone Pipeline. Coming up, the Supreme Court is going to address the Indian Child Welfare Act. And since the decisions prior, there's been a shift in the court. So I know my tribe and me specifically, I'm concerned whether the sovereignty of tribal nations is going to be diminished. Even with Deb Haaland's appointment as Secretary of the Interior, I don't know. I mean, is it a wonderful step, monumental for Indian country? But I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on Native sovereignty and how, or what should be going on or what can be going on.
Yeah, Ariel, I really appreciate this question because Democratic leadership put me on Natural Resources Committee. They didn't have enough Democrats. So they were like, Rashida, you're going on this committee. And it was my third committee. And I was like, what? And I've learned so much. One thing, Ariel, that they seem to only, even as long as it doesn't prevent them building more pipelines, fracking, you name it, they are good to go with our indigenous community. So I want you to worry. I think it is important because what I've been hearing in these committee hearings is we love our indigenous communities. We, all those things. And then in the end result, they've always seem to lean towards the corporations having more access and then dismissing, what I heard with indigenous communities in Minnesota. It was so devastating to hear with Line 3 that they pitted tribes against other tribes. It was unbelievable. And really getting this pathway to say Enbridge, go for it. Even though they've had, close to over 40 breakage already in the line, and always already seen that it's impacting them being able to, produce wild rice and so much more. Ariel, I think you need to. And yes, of course, it's great to have people like us in many ways and folks that have that lived experience in these places of power, but she needs you to be loud. I mean, Secretary Haaland cannot be just left alone. You need to be, really move and give her that, cover. I always tell that to my residents, you better be protesting me. I want you out there now, protest, give me cover for not voting for, the infrastructure bill, because what in there, by the way, is a pathway to revisit and study the decision by President Biden to shut down Keystone Pipeline. It creates a pathway for Alaska Pipeline. It waters down NEPA, y'all. That's environmental assessments for our communities. I mean, this is really one of the main areas that I can be able to protect my communities. And so, Ariel, we gotta, you should, and I'm glad that you're talking about this in this space, because I think a lot of people don't realize there is a movement, because land is, the access to our lands, the access to where our indigenous communities live, the very few that still now even have access and ownership over, they have every intention of fracking, piping, taking everything and privatizing all of it. So it is definitely that you definitely want to worry about in regards to sovereignty. Even the decision by the Canada government devastated me, Ariel, and what they did with Line 5, this. He came out and he's like, oh, and he all of a sudden cares about tribal agreements. Like, this tribal agreement says it's unbelievable to me how quick they are to dismiss our indigenous communities and the impact on so many of our tribal communities when they make decisions about environmental injustices that just allow fossil fuel industry and those profiting off of extraction from our land. So in National Lawyers Guild, we got to be out there with them. I can't believe the kind of abuse that those that have been protesting, especially Line 3 and others, have been getting because they're trying to shut it down. Thank you, Ariel, for that really important question.
Congresswoman, I don't know how much time you have left with us, but it looks like we have one more question from Zoom from Nick Ryan.
Hi, Congresswoman Tlaib. It's so good to have you here with us. I just want to say thank you first off. So my question was this. Considering recent organizing like the Occupy Wall Street movement, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and the often violent reaction from police and institutions to such movements, What are your thoughts on the future of communal direct action practices to secure rights to life, food, shelter? Do you think that those kinds of practices are scalable up to regional levels, like a non-professional citizen bargaining unit rather than like a union, like a professional? I just wanted to ask your thoughts, what they might be on that.
I mean, that's really deep, y'all. Like, of course, you know, trust me, I'm a democratic socialist, so I want to see us own the means of production. I want us to see us really be in charge of how these systems are set up, and that you know, in that regard. So you know, for me, I know that the way the system is set up right now, and towards really picking profit over people or quality life or you know, a more fair, just system, and it's something that I'm going to continue to fight against. But I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, the kind of I think not only in creating unions, I say that is because I'm in Detroit, and that has been really one of the ways that we've been able to fight against corporate greed and against really this capitalistic, you know, system that has painfully like hurt my communities in generational like pain and oppression. And so I know for me working at Sugar Law Center, Ray knows, you know, from the co-ops to the work that we've been doing in regards to, if we're going to work in this, like we need to co-own it. We need to talk about those kinds of systems. And I think, you know, seeing this over and over again, I think very much in my district, it's very, very clear that some of the processes that worked before in unionization and pushing back, it hasn't always resulted in meaningful change for the residents and the workers in the space. So I don't know, again, if that answers your question, but you are talking to a person that understands, because I think your question is about structure and the system that we have in our country, where access to many of the things that you discussed is because, again, the system is set up where the very few have access to, the very top have the ability to say whether or not we can have access to food and access to all of these things and the pricing, everything. They seem to, again, be like, my colleagues continue to remind me that we're in a global capitalist society, and this is just the way it is, even though our neighbors are hungry.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Congresswoman Tlaib. I believe we're about out of our time with you. Thank you for being so generous with your time and for speaking with us tonight. It was really incredible to be able to ask you questions in this manner. And thank you for all that you've done and continue to do for the progressive movement.
No, thank you all so much. Again, you give credibility to someone like me in Congress. Continue to speak that truth, even if your voice shakes. We need you all. And please, more of you, run for office. I am not exaggerating when I say it. Please think about running for office at all levels of government. We need you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. That was incredible. Oh, sweet. You can switch over to me. Okay, so it was incredible. Our next speaker tonight is Gabriela Romero. Gabriela is an Albany Law alumna and a public defender, and she's currently running for Albany's Common Council in the 6th Ward. As a public defender, she represents people who do not have the resources to defend themselves against a system that criminalizes poverty, mental health, and addiction. She works closely with clients to build stability and to prevent recidivism. Gabriela is active in the Capital District community and has a strong track record of strong advocacy for her community in the face of an adversarial system. It is my honor to present Gabriela Romero.
Hi, everyone. Wow, that was such an inspiring discussion with the Congresswoman. Thank you, Ray, for organizing this. Thank you, NLG, for having me. And so wonderful that the Congresswoman continued to emphasize running for office at the local level. And I think that's kind of what I'm going to focus on today. But just to thank the NLG, our position in this movement is that we are really the lawyers for the movement. And I hope that everyone that's here has the same courage to pull on their NLG work when making the decision as students to choose a career, because it's a very courageous move to involve yourself in public service. And we really need more invigorated and passionate people like yourselves, hopefully, that will come to an event like this to just be in that public service space. So I hope you guys all think about that. So I kind of want to just give a brief background about me and a little bit about my law school experience, and I guess connecting that between law school and the public defender's office and the Common Council. So I started Albany Law in 2015, and I really hope Dean Queenan or Dean Ouellette are not here, because I was definitely involved myself in extracurriculars a little bit more than the classroom experience. And I really focused on those opportunities to drive my experience in law school. I was the editor-in-chief of my journal. I was an EE of a journal for the Government Law Center, co-director of some pro bono projects, president of my class, VP of the school, and then was a finalist in the senior prize competition while studying for the bar, which was really, wow, would not wish it on anyone. But the pro bono scholars program, as some of you guys may know, allows you to take the bar in February and then work full-time for your last semester. So I was at the Federal Defender's Office, and that really started a streak of courageousness for me, I think, because I was being given the opportunity to speak on the record in federal hearings and appearances all over the Northern District, which was really wonderful for me. So on a certain level, I'd love to put in a plug about the importance of getting involved in clubs and internships and really making those connections that set the stage for your eventual job. So I graduated in 2018, and I was briefly in private practice, then started in the public defender's office, which has been the most invigorating work. And I'm really lucky to be one of those people that wake up every day extremely excited about what I'm doing, both on the litigation side, in the courtroom, kind of creating case law with these new bail reform and discovery reform statutes, but also on the advocacy side, advocating for bail reform when it was something that we were all kind of fighting for. Because we're positioned in Albany, we have that ability to do both. So I guess as many of you would know, being a public defender in a city like Albany, I guess in a county like Albany, because it's not just the city of Albany that is our jurisdiction, you wear so many different hats. In New York City public defender's offices, they have like a whole department specifically for social work, a whole department specifically for substance use and abuse. But in our office, we wear many different hats. So I'm representing them on criminal cases, but also connecting them to health insurance, serving as an intermediary between their landlords, sometimes their employers, getting them into drug or mental health treatment, all while, preventing them from being in jail or in prison. And I think it's this work in the public defender's office as a lawyer there that exposed me to the cracks in the city's system that kind of fueled me to run for the Albany's Common Council. And I guess that was the reasoning, but the spark was actually created last summer during a Tuesday night wing night with my law school friends. We were all, just like so many of you, very concerned and impassioned with the social justice movements that have been going on forever, but we all saw communities take it on in a way that was very different from what we've seen before. So we were all involved in different ways, attending protests, getting involved in community movements, and they kind of joked like, "Oh, you should run for office." And I'm like, "No way, that's just not in the cards for me." And very similar to what the Congresswoman said, I'm like, that's a sellout, right? That I'd rather keep fighting where I'm at. And I guess in a certain way, it just kind of came together. Speaking to what started right as like a wing night at Graney's ended up being speaking to other community advocates and local politicians and leaders and mentors. And the way that kind of snowballed was that, you start speaking to a local advocate or someone that you've looked up to, and then it kind of starts moving past there. And these people I looked up to in law school suddenly became mentors in this movement, people that I would go to with questions or to talk about strategy. Like all of a sudden I'm texting Tiffany Caban, like, how did this happen? It was so cool and such an interesting movement that we're in right now in politics, that these people that are looking for people-powered movements are so interested in helping others. And I was really inspired like that to continue this intense work in the way that I'm doing it. So I guess for me, and to that same point, the message that this campaign really stood for, which felt new and refreshing, is obviously transparent and unapologetic governance, but also naturally, because of my background in criminal justice and my passion for that type of reform, the campaign focused on addressing the root causes of crime by passing legislation that's for all people, not just a few, legislation that will increase government accountability and fairness. So in our city, we finally passed good cause eviction, which I would love to talk a little bit more about later, but something that I'm also kind of pushing for is encouraging a housing first model to address housing insecurity, creating an open database of police disciplinary records in accordance with the repeal of 50A. And there's just so much more that you can do on the local level, that you need these kind of strong, unapologetic leaders to stand up for, because status quo is so normal, and especially in Albany County politics. And it's just such exciting work to be in this position to kind of start these new things. But I guess to that same point about Albany County politics, I wanted to run to address these cracks in the system, not because someone asked me to do this or prepared me for this position, had created this space for me. I had to really fight for it in a really, by every definition of that statement. Right from the beginning, the Democratic Party's like, we're not endorsing you. We have someone that we've known for years that we're going to push into this position. And that was very scary. And I think a lot of first-time candidates feel that way when they try to get involved in this inner circle. And it was those mentors that I had to pull upon. It was those opportunities that I had in law school that I had to kind of touch back on, it's called banking in on it, right? Pulling back on that opportunity to say, wow, oh my gosh, remember when I was in front of this judge in federal court and I had no idea what I was doing, but I kind of stood up and I pulled it out and it worked out. It's that confidence that you need to pull on, because you need more leaders that are regular people. You need more community-centered, people-powered movements, because there is a really wonderful reckoning that's happening in politics, and it's really exciting to be a part of it. So I would love to answer any questions, or I can put my email in the chat if anyone has anything private that they'd like to ask me, but I'd love to talk more about my experience in law school, any public defender type stuff, or just Albany city politics.
Thank you, Gabriella. That was incredible, and it's great to hear your story. Does anyone have any questions in the audience?
Oh my gosh, Dinoulet is in this chat. I just saw her. Hello, Dinoulet. I'm sorry I didn't go to class as much as you probably did. Hi.
Ray, let's see. I can unmute him.
Hi, Gabriella. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I just wanted to ask a quick question that relates back to what Congresswoman Tlaib was saying. This choice, this thrusting yourself into the political arena, like you said, it kind of just fell upon you like happenstance, but the importance, the fighting all the way through it, how can you connect your law school experience to that leadership role? Would you say that Albany Law really put you in a position for being able to grab the reins and find yourself in the seat of common counsel?
Yeah, definitely. And I shouldn't, I'm going to correct myself that it's not like I fell into it as much. And that's such a privileged thing to say. And that's the people that we don't like are the ones that fall into it, right? It wasn't that as much as it was an idea that I had never thought was possible or realistic for someone like me. And it wasn't just falling into it. It was definitely like a very legitimate and deliberate call to the Board of Elections, and a lot of jargon and very complicated vernacular to get through, but people want to help. So that's, I think, important that there are people that will help you get there. I guess experiences in law school. I think that my experience at the public defender's office when I was an intern, and probably the grace and flexibility of the professors when I would say, oh, I'm like second seating a potential murder trial, can I not go to class next week? Or I would say the encouragement from professors too. We staged a walkout. I was involved in a walkout. I definitely didn't organize it, but professors saying like, that was a good job and you kind of caused a ruckus, but like, we're so proud of you and that was a good idea to do that. Or, you know, just being myself and really flourishing a little bit more in law school too, being able to speak out about things that matter felt helpful. And I want to also just say that I definitely involved myself in more traditional extracurriculars like journal and moot court, but that even the pro bono projects and the volunteer opportunities that I have were also very fruitful and are great opportunities to get involved in, because there's much more, right, than just the very traditional journal and moot court in law school.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. I really appreciate it.
Is Martin's hand raised? Martin?
Unless you wanted to go.
You.
Okay.
Thank you, Gabriella, for joining us tonight. It's inspiring to hear an alumna who's doing great things after graduation. I'm wondering how current Albany Law students can connect with alumni and alumni in a way that's not just about career advancement, but is about advancing the causes and the issues that we share in common. So whether that's getting involved in your campaign or whatever else you might think of, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can get involved with alumni and alumni who share common values and interests. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Do you know what? Actually might be able to answer that one a little bit more, but I will put my email in the chat, and please, Ray, send my information to everyone. I think to your question, if you're not using the institutional Albany Law School pipeline to connect them to alumni, getting involved in local political activist groups, like you mentioned DSA before, that was a wonderful a very complicated and treacherous endorsement to receive, and I wear that so proudly. Maybe a conversation that we can have over lunch about that endorsement process, but I would encourage you to involve yourself in those groups like DSA, Working Families Party, and then they will be able to connect you with the right politicians, because I think in local politics, especially what I'm learning in local Democratic Party politics, that you can say you're a Democrat, but there are many different types. And if you want to get yourself involved with a local leader that really is aligned with your interests, you should probably go through the interest groups themselves that will then give you the right persons. I'm not the only DSA person in the Capital District, and there are many others that would probably love to chat with you about politics, take you on as an intern, all of that.
Thank you, Gabriella, and thank you for that question, Martin. I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. My name is Rebecca Novick. I first saw you at the Public Defenders Chat last semester or before the summer, and I worked as an intern for the Schenectady Public Defender's Office over the summer, and it was a great experience. And then when you mentioned you were running for office, I think you're so cool, and I just had to tell you that. So as a young woman who's been a public defender, who's now running for local office. Have you had any moments of feeling like I'm totally in over my head, or like people aren't taking me seriously? And how did you work through those moments?
Yeah, all the time, really all the time. How do I work through those moments? I still deal with them. I really do. I've always, not always, because I didn't really feel this way when I was in school, but I should say, as I kind of came into myself as a young Latina, as a young female attorney, as a young public defender, I started to take on this theory that someone can outspeak me, maybe they can be more eloquent, someone can be more familiar with the law in that discussion, but I will go home and I will read every section of the Albany local code so that I can figure out exactly what it is. And if I know what the presentation is going to be about, I have to do my research. And that's something that I think we unfortunately have to take on as young politicians, right? There's such a massive amount of information. There's a big hill that you have to leap over to be just as informed and aware, maybe, as your older colleagues. So one thing is always doing my research and making sure that I really do that work. Because, you know, in law school, you could like get away with maybe not doing the reading when they ask you a question and you're cold called. But when you're in a group and you're asking, how do we actually change housing in the city of Albany? And someone's like, Ms. Romero, what do you think? You need to know what the USDO is, and you need to know all of these little acronyms about housing, which I've done my own research, but there's just also so many wonderful advocates that you can count on that are already in those spaces doing that work that can help you through that. Something else I think, though, that's also important is that maybe as women we need to realize is that this lack of confidence we have is toxic. And we've really got to work on that. Like, even if we don't necessarily know what we're talking about, it's okay to say, you know what? Thank you so much for your question. I'm not sure exactly the answer to that, but I promise I will get back to you and I'll have a legitimate answer for you. And that's also okay. And that's something that I'm learning as well. And so once you have those two things and you learn to balance those two things, doing your research, but also knowing that you might not know everything, you can enter a situation with so much more confidence. And you should do that. And you should really do that. And I wish more politicians did that too, to be honest. People that really have been in these seats for so long, I wish that they told people when they didn't know things. We would have a much different political sphere if people could just admit when they're wrong. But I hope that answers it.
Thank you. That was a great question and a great answer. Do you have any more questions from the audience? One, then two.
Hi, Ms. Romero. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. I was just wondering if you could speak a bit about some of the local police reform that you would like to see in the capital region, and more specifically Albany, especially after protests from last summer and kind of the continued controversy with Albany City PD that's been consistent. Yeah, I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Can you hear me? Okay. We should have another discussion like just on this because this was so important to me and was a big passion of mine, obviously, before I decided to run. So something that was just passed was Proposal 7, which was a ballot proposal on the back of the ballot in the most recent election, which allowed for the Community Police Review Board to have independent investigative subpoena power, disciplinary authority, and then they would be able to have a 1% budget protection in the budget going forward. 1% of the police budget would be their budget going forward. That was something that I pushed really, really hard for because I didn't have a challenger in my general election a few weeks ago. So that I was just pushing Proposal 7. So that has passed, and that is just such a great measure that I think will really provide so much more transparency and hopefully more accountability in the process, because the Community Police Review Board, and for those of you that don't know, I should just explain, it's a group of people that are appointed to this position by both the mayor's office and the Common Council. And before this ballot proposal, Proposal 7, they were just given a packet of paper by the internal police investigator when there's an allegation of misconduct or brutality. And they're just given this packet of paper and they're like, huh, that was good, I guess. And they had no ability to independently subpoena witnesses or paperwork, 911 calls, anything like that. They're just quite literally a rubber stamp. So now they're able to subpoena all of this documents and people and just more material. And then they're also able to investigate things on their own. So speaking to Albany Police Department specifically, I mean, there's so many examples. Last summer with the protest of people that were tented outside of the Albany Police Department and the movement of those people, if anyone remembers that specific incident. During that, the Albany Police Department not only covered up their badges, their identification, but they also were displaying both Proud Boy propaganda and Blue Lives Matter shields, assumedly bought with city funds, with the Blue Lives Matter stripe, the very obvious symbol of that movement. And so that's a problem. But the Community Police Review Board did not have the power before Proposal 7 to independently investigate that. They would have to wait for someone to put in a complaint with them. So now they will be able to just on their own say, that was bad, we're investigating it. And then they can also more freely are able to make policy proposals and suggestions to change police rules and just general legislation. So that's great, and that was already passed, but I have a feeling that we're gonna have to deal with that in the court system. I know that Rochester had some issues with whether or not a Community Police Review Board can actually provide disciplinary power. And like I said, that's still being litigated. So going forward, some things that I think are important to change about our police department. I mentioned the open database of police disciplinary records. And I said in accordance with the repeal of 50A. 50A used to have a ban on openness of police records, and now it's publicly accessible, hypothetically, right? And so having this open database, let's say you're at a protest and you identify that there's an officer that punched you in the face, like happened at the encampment example that I just spoke about. You would be able to type their name into a database and see all of the other things that they've done. On your end, that's making you understand the process a little more. And on their end, on a police end, they know that everything that they do will be out there. And I think that's important. As lawyers, if we mess up, our disciplinary things are out there. So I think we should all be kind of held to that similar standard. And ideally, in an ideal world, that would also make them think twice about their own misconduct. So those are some things too, and I could talk about this forever. Truly, there's so many ideas. Another one is having first responders to 911 calls be trauma-informed EMTs or social workers, but cutting the police department from that. The county itself has a program right now where you, in the hill towns, where if you call 911, EMT person responds, but then the police are right behind them. And we need to remove the police totally from those types of calls. If they're around the corner or if they're there present, but they're not actually the first responder, they're just 10 feet away, that kind of negates the whole concept of that. And there's a lot of research that I've learned from talking to people that are in these circles doing this type of work actively that say that you just should remove the police completely from these types of calls. Still trying to decide who and where we would get the people from, if we could connect with the fire department or with like local ambulance organizations for that. But that's something I'm also thinking. I'd love to hear your suggestions too. We should definitely have another chat if you guys have other things that you'd like to see in police reform.
Yeah, we would be happy to have a separate talk about this anytime. Anytime you're free, we will reach out, and I'm getting thumbs up in the audience. So that would be great. I know we have another question in the audience.
Hi, Gabrielle. Thank you so much for being with us today, and congratulations on winning the primary. It was more exciting. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can build in some accountability to our more seasoned members of Common Council who are maybe, once again, a little bit less in tune to some of the suffering that is existing in our city and our state. You know, it was so easy to pass good cause, but man, ban tear gas, ooh, that's too scary. And just how do we, one, get them out of office, and two, build accountability while they're still there?
That is such a great question. And that's something that me and my team have been scheming about since we won the primary. We're like, okay, who's next? Like, who are we going to support? And so your question asked, how do we keep other Common Council members accountable and make sure that their governance is transparent? I mean, I'm going to call them out, as I have done at these public comment periods before, during the campaign, and before I formally won the general. And I have used these other social spheres, like a DSA is so vocal. So whenever we have like a big piece of legislation, for example, you brought up tear gas. I'm not sure if you're following local law M, which is now a watered down version of the tear gas ban, which would basically allow for tear gas in the exact same way it is right now, but it would be classified as a tear gas ban. You would only be allowed to use it in the definition of a riot as defined by the criminal statutes, which is so general and frankly, like, constitutionally overbroad, but that's an argument for another day. How do we prevent that? How do we keep people accountable that voted yes on the tear gas ban before? How do we make sure they vote no on local law M and vote on the full tear gas ban the minute I get into office January 1st? And the way you do that is really through people power, and it's through people showing up to these public comment periods. It's frankly like calling them and emailing them and sending letters, which sounds really archaic, but you have to do things like that because as constituents, as people, as voters, we can't just like let this type of thing happen. And I think when people come out strongly, that's when politicians at the local level then start realizing like, oh, that means something. People care about that. But at the same time, the way that we really make it effective is by running against them. I think everyone that's in this meeting right now should go change their voter registration and change their address. I remember I actually got Ray to change his address when he moved. That even temporarily while you're in Albany for these 3 years, you are involved in Albany politics. Everything that I will be working on will affect you as an Albany resident. So first step is making sure that you're registered where you're living. Second step is getting involved in these interest groups like the Working Families Party or DSA, personal ones that I love, but maybe a more traditional Democratic party like the Albany County Young Democrats might appeal to you more. That's fine. But just getting involved in those groups and then just making that courageous decision to say, I think I'm going to run. Naturally, if you're in law school and you want to run, you got to stick around for the next 4 years. But if you're going to do that and that's something that makes sense for you, you should run. And there's a lot of strength and courage in running a grassroots campaign that may not be as strong as the incumbent. But I've really learned that those types of campaigns push people to a certain extent as well. And it's that type of push that is meaningful and has real effective result as well. So truly just running, whether you win or if you push that person to vote yes on a tear gas ban, like, great. And I'd love to help you with that. That's something I'd love to do is encourage more people to get involved in local politics and teach them how to run and give them all of these details. Because it is so much jargon. And thankfully my mom is retired and she really was, it was truly Doris and Gabriela Romero for the first few months, as Ray may remember, because I think my mom might've knocked on your door. And that's okay, right? That's how it started. But just making the step to do it is what matters. And I think that answers it. But one more thing I want to mention is don't be afraid to make that public comment, whether it's an email, whether it's showing up in person, whether it's showing up to that Zoom, writing a letter to the mayor. Those things are seem silly, but are actually very effective. And I feel like I'm talking too much, but there was a specific thing that we were working on during the campaign, small 6-word specific issue about this event, Lights in the Park, which was in Washington Park, which its main beneficiary was PAL, which is a police organization. And I don't want to necessarily get into it right now. Maybe that's for our next conversation, but we organized this letter writing, email writing, Twitter, social media, tagging the mayor type of thing. And it's not like we're passing legislation. We were just encouraging the mayor to not approve a permit for this specific event. And it worked. And it worked. And it's probably because we annoyed them so much and we tagged them on Twitter and we called and emailed. But we did our research explaining why this organization was negative for the community. So those types of things really work.
Thank you. Are there any further questions in the audience? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was really incredible to get to ask you questions and hear about this on a local level. And it was really inspiring. I think I've seen the same from a few peers. And thank you all for coming and for participating and asking all of these great questions. Thank you, of course, to Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib for giving us her time as well tonight. And Gabriella, we will certainly reach out about facilitating another conversation like this.
I would love that. Thank you. And Ray, please share my email with everyone if you guys have any other questions or would like to meet to talk about politics or anything.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. And I hope that you all continue to stay engaged with the National Lawyers Guild and the mission, and that we can continue to facilitate these conversations. I will share your email with everyone if they don't have it in the chat. Thank you again for your time. It was incredible.
Thank you.